And this doesn't have a ton of color yet. I should actually pull out my rhubarb wine while that's dissolving and show you the colors of some of these things. This is the color that rhubarb wine turns out to be. It's actually pretty light. Unless you've got a rhubarb, you know, some rhubarb has a much pinker stalk and some has a greener stalk. So depending on what wine or what fruit you're using, you'll get a different color of wine. Whoa, there's extra stuff. All right. So you stir this up like Kool-Aid. Just make sure you get all the sugar dissolved or you won't get a good reading. That's mainly what you need to do on this. Any questions on anything yet? Nothing? Covering it pretty well? Rhubarb does take a little bit longer to ferment out than some of the other fruits I've discovered. It seems like it takes a little closer to 5 months than 3. So, let's see, where am I at? Oh, that's probably just about right. I get pretty good at guessing at some of this stuff. Yeah, okay. Yep, that's at 1.090. All right, good. That was a good guess. Well, bricks. He's asking about specific gravity versus bricks. You can certainly use bricks. Bricks is, a lot of people don't know about bricks, and usually home winemakers work with specific gravity unless they're working with grapes. The bricks readings came from people actually going out into the vineyards, and actually there's something called a refractometer. You can put juice right on the screen and you will get a bricks reading, but then you need to do calculations. And this particular thing, and most recipes call for specific gravity. They're all on here, sure they are. But you know what I'm really looking for on this isn't specific gravity or bricks. I'm really looking for the potential alcohol. That's what I'm kind of going for anyway. So whichever one you want to look at is fine. And if you turn that hydrometer around as it comes through past your seat, you'll see that all 3 things, if you turn it at a certain line, like look at 12%, and you will see what the bricks reading is, what the specific gravity is. And it isn't rocket science. You can get into, you know, much more of a chemical analysis sort of thing, but this is plenty close for home winemakers. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to keep it simple enough so everybody can make wine at home without having lots of fancy equipment, okay? That's all we're trying to do, end up with good wine. Okay, so I think we've got the sugars about right. The next thing I always check is a pH reading. pH is kind of important. Now you've got 2 things, pH and acidity, and they kind of work together, but they're not the same thing. Generally, if you've got a high pH, you have a low acidity. If you have a low pH, you generally have a high acidity. Certain fruits naturally have a higher acidity than others. Cranberry wine, high in acids. You can imagine that by taking a bite out of a cranberry. Take a bite out of a strawberry, it's going to be very low in acidity. Blueberries are the same way. I'm not quite sure where this one will be at. I have found when I take out part of the pulp like this, because usually rhubarb is so tart that it can be, you don't always need much acid blend, but sometimes when I pull out part of the pulp, I still add a little bit. The first test I'm going to show you is a very inexpensive test. It's a pH test strip. And you just dip one in, and it's easy on a light colored juice like this. And actually, that's not too bad. Yeah, you're trying to get it at about 3.4, 3.5. If you can get it in that range, if you can get your pH in about that range, you're going to have a pretty good tasting wine. And a lot of it is even taste. I remind people, if you don't have pH testing equipment, taste your juice. It should taste very good from the get-go. Okay. So this is not actually too bad. I might not adjust the acidity on this one, though we will on the. Okay, well that's good that I don't have it. Matt, could you get somebody grab me some acid blend for my next fruit wine? I see I don't have it here. Thank you. Okay, so I don't think actually don't think the acidity needs changing, but if I were to put in a small amount of acid blend, that would drop my pH level a little bit. I'm going to pass this around. Well, no, I actually think it's pretty good. That's how this one will show up. I also have a pH meter here. They work quite well. They're the most accurate. Rinse it out. I've had it sitting calibrating in solutions, first a 7.01 solution and then a 4.01. So I actually hauled it home and back overnight. So thank you so much, Clark. Appreciate it. Must have used that up. Okay. So I'll run a more accurate test here and we can see if I really need to make any changes to it. And it actually shows a little bit lower. So this one only shows it at 2.98. So I have to believe this one a little bit more. So it is a little bit more acidic. And this is one of the tricky things. If you've got something that's a little higher in acidity than lower, so this low pH means it's maybe a little bit high in acidity, one way you can correct that, you can blend it with a different kind of fruit, which I'm not going to do today because I'm going to do strawberry separately. Or you can dilute it down a little bit. You can or use a grape concentrate, and so you don't lose flavor, but you're adjusting it out. You can also use calcium carbonate, which I have right over here, and that drops the acidity just a little bit, so that for flavor. Okay. What else am I going to say about that? But this is a more accurate pH test strip. I also have a third one here. This is a Acuvin test strip. I think they work fairly well, though the experts say no, they're not nearly close enough. But it is better than nothing. And they're like $23 for 10 tests. So if you don't have the more expensive testing equipment, use the less expensive testing equipment. You need something to try to get this into balance a little bit. Okay. Because I put Camden tablet on this 3 days ago, I'm not going to add any more at this point. I'm just going to put a yeast on it. I'm going to do more of the acid and pH testing on the strawberry wine. That one's going to be a little bit easier to work with, but there's a lot of different kinds of yeast you could be using with your rhubarb wine. I happen to personally like the Côtes de Blanc, so that's what I'm going to use. It's a little fruitiness, a little tiny bit of residual sweetness. It doesn't ferment it down quite so hard and dry. Something like the Premier Cuvée, a lot of people use Premier Cuvée or champagne yeast. Those do ferment it down drier, so you're going to get more alcohol, a little less sweetness, okay? But with any of these, most of these, when I adjust the sugars the way they are, it's going to ferment down fairly dry. But what I do at the end, after it's been fermenting for a number of months, then I'll do whatever kind of back sweetening I feel like I need to do to make it taste pleasant to me. So, you can do all kinds of equations and stuff, but I usually just pour a little bit of wine in a glass, taste it, and maybe add sometimes a wine conditioner. That's one way to do some back sweetening. Another thing people do is cook up a simple syrup with 2 cups of sugar to a cup of water. That works fairly well. Another thing I started doing on certain things, I actually did on my strawberry wine, so get into that one, is you can take a frozen juice concentrate if you want to. Now, I can't do that for rhubarb. I've never seen a frozen rhubarb juice. But they do have strawberry, like I did a strawberry breeze in one of these, and I kind of liked it. Brought back a little bit of the fruity nose and a little bit of sweetness. You can control that. There again, don't just dump it in. Add the amount that you like. So just add it gradually. I keep adding small amounts into a glass of wine until I get to where I like it. And then you can transfer that knowledge into your big batch. Now, did I have tannin on this recipe? Yes. I didn't even talk about it. Where's my, or I should having a recipe out would be a good thing, wouldn't it? Okay. So a couple things I Yeah, what tannin does is it brings in a little bit of astringency, and a grape has tannins in the seeds, the stems, the skins. So some of the other fruits don't have as much of that. So usually a small amount of tannin will go quite a long ways in just adding some structure and flavor to your wine. So I will put quarter teaspoon. So actually sounds like a little more than I might want. I'm going to make it a scant quarter teaspoon on that. Another thing we always just add in kind of out of hand is a yeast nutrient. What the yeast nutrient does is it works like a vitamin to feed the yeast. So it just helps you, just helps with the fermentation. If you forgot it, chances are your wine is still going to ferment out. Generally, when you're fermenting any of these wines, you want them like 65 to 75 degrees, and that is to keep the yeast itself happy. It doesn't really matter for some of the other stuff, but the yeast has certain temperature ranges, and I don't have that on this particular yeast sheet that I passed out, but up on our refrigerators back there are some charts that will say certain ones have a much wider temperature range than others. Now, the cooler the temperature is, the longer it's going to take for your wine to finish up, okay? Normally, on something like this, it's in the primary fermenter for about 1 week. Then I rack it off, and when I'm racking off, I'll just show, there might be a couple people that don't know what racking off is. Does everybody know? Okay. Racking off is siphoning. I won't take but a few seconds on this, but sometimes it just helps to see it being done. Let's see. Oh shoot, which one did I lose? I don't know. Who knows? There's so many cords. That part I don't like. I might have to grab a chair here just a second. Did I lose you, Matt? No. Okay. Sorry about this. I keep losing my supplies. They disappear on me. Okay, so this is racking on. You have, in this case, this little tool, this gadget is called an auto siphon. You can also, sometimes we have something more basic called a racking cane. Just so I can stick this on wherever it's from. Okay, so the way, a racking cane basically looks like just this part. If you get an auto siphon, who's got an auto siphon around here? They're wonderful, I love them, yeah. Okay, so if you have just a racking cane, you put this part in your wine, and then you just suck on the end of the hose, get your siphon started. If you have an auto siphon, you don't have to do all that. Of course, maybe it takes some of the fun out of it because you're not sitting on the floor drinking as much wine, but there you go. That's all you do. You just give it a pump, it starts flowing. There's a little cap that stays on the bottom, and that keeps it out of the sediments. Okay, so I'll just let that do its thing. That is racking off. And because there's a cap on the bottom, you've got a layer of sediment. So in a week, I'll take this. There'll be a thick layer of sediment on the bottom at that point. I'll just set my racking cane in there, siphon it into a glass carboy, let it sit and ferment. About a month, you probably want to rack it off again. You're going to have another layer of sediment, rack it off maybe 1 or 2 more times, not a ton on these. But rhubarb wine does tend to take quite a while to ferment out. It's worth it. Let's see, did I put everything in? I'm kind of skipping around here a little bit. Yeah, I'm not using the grape concentrate today. All right, and all I'm going to do on this one is just sprinkle yeast on top. I'm also going to, and just let it sit. That's really all you have to do to get that one going. I will put a lid on it and an airlock. And this will be fine. Next week, I'll take it to the next step. These are tight-fitting lids. They've got a little seal on them, so I just pop it on here. This is the bubbler airlock. In this case, they're just you can use like water or sanitizer or vodka. Sometimes put vodka in. All of these airlocks have a line where you should have them filled up to. Okay.
Beth, is it necessary to pitch your yeast?
No, you don't really have to on something like this one. That'll be fine. I am going to pitch a yeast also, so you can see how I do that. Pitching yeast is dissolving it ahead of time, letting it grow a little bit. I'm going to do that right now with the Premier Cuvée. You can watch that grow while I'm putting the rest of the stuff to it, okay? I rarely, actually, and I used to always pitch my yeast, which is sort of like what we used to do when we make bread, starting it that way. But wine kids never did that, so that's what got me thinking, oh, that's too hot. It needs to be around 90 degrees. You don't want it too hot. And this is my thermometer, is my finger. It's probably not very professional, but that's what I'm using. Okay, so that's about right. I've been making bread my whole life, so I'm like, okay, that'll be fine. You don't want it too hot. If it's too hot, sorry, if it's too hot, you'll kill the yeast, okay? You don't want to do that. So pitching yeast, we're going to start it like this. Just sprinkle that in there and let it sit. You can add stuff to it, but usually you just dissolve it for starters. Sometimes when we run into trouble with a fermentation, sometimes I get calls from people that they have a stuck fermentation. Then I tell them to pitch a yeast like this, wait about a half an hour until it's nice and foamy, then feed in like a quarter cup of juice and let it sit there until that gets foamy. Feed in a little bit more juice till that gets foamy again. And what that does is it gets the yeast acclimated to whatever alcohol and sugar levels you have in your wine already. And then at that point you can pour it in over the top. I just let it sit right on top overnight actually, and then stir it in the next day. And what that does kind of builds the brain of the yeast. Okay? So you kind of watch that on the side. That'll do its thing. So this one's kind of ready to go for the first week here, a month there. Get a glass carboy. You can let it go for, then rack it off again, and maybe let it sit a couple more months. Rack it off again, let it sit a couple more months. It does take quite a while, and you always have to keep an airlock on it. You can kind of tell when it's getting done by looking at it. It should be getting nice and clear. If you are having trouble with it clearing, we've got lots of really great things we call finding agents that will help clear it out. We've got the pectic enzyme that's already in there. We have the, we've got isinglass, super clear, bentonite, just a lot of different, sparkloid, did I say sparkloid and gelatin findings, things like that. They all work fairly well. They all do slightly different things. So if you're having trouble with it clearing, there's stuff you can do. You can also, some people own filters. You can also filter your wine. That works kind of nicely on some of the fruit wines, but not everybody has that, so don't worry about it. Okay? So then at the end, I would say you think, okay, this is getting ready to bottle. That's when you want to taste it again. You want to see if it needs any final tweaking, or you can even do this a couple of months beforehand. Whenever you think it's done fermenting, that's when you want to stabilize it. You're going to want to add, first taste it. If you want to add any kind of sweetness or flavorings back into it, you do it at that time. Then you add another Camden tablet. You crush that, dissolve it at that point, and stir it in. Just dissolve it in like a tablespoon of water, no big deal. And then you'll also want to put in, on a fruit wine, generally you're going to want to add a half a teaspoon of sorbate, potassium sorbate per gallon. That helps stabilize it so it won't re-ferment. So the Camden tablet will kill off any residual yeast. The sorbate will keep it from re-fermenting, because if you do add any sugar into your wine, it'll start to re-ferment again. My mom, this is my step back in time, because this is how a lot of people used to make wine. They just keep adding sugar. Every time it would slow down on the ferment, you just keep throwing more sugar in, thinking that it needed to keep fermenting. Well, you get such high alcohol and it would be so out of control. It was like drinking Kickapoo joy juice or something. So so that's why if you adjust the sugars on the front end, kind of leave it alone, and then if you want to back sweeten on the back end, you have much more control doing it that way. There's a lot of recipes, man, some of them will call for like 7 pounds of sugar right at the beginning. Well, it's going to end up being a very heavy sweet wine. There's no way the yeast can eat through that much sugar, and you get a stalled fermentation. So it's not the only way by a long shot to get wine started, but it's an easy way to control it at home. Okay.